So let's move on to the next one. I got some awesome wins. I appreciate everyone jumping in there. So what does it mean when it comes to Google Tag Manager and server-side tagging with Shopify? So my promise for everyone on today is I'm going to share, take 60 minutes. So it's scheduled for 90 minutes. I'm going to try to leave a lot of time for Q&A at the end. But my promise is share everything that I've learned, our team's learned when it comes to server-side tagging with Google Tag Manager, with a Facebook Conversions API, and how it relates to Shopify specifically. The concepts that we'll be talking through, it can, even though I'll be using Facebook as primarily the main talking point, the concepts will apply if you're using Snapchat, AdWords, affiliates, etc. I'll try to bring that back. So if anything, if you have any questions about certain channels, drop them in. The other thing, if you've been on a few webinars, we've done a few of these this year, it's very much going to be hands-on. So I will be showing demos. I'll be going into the Facebook Business Manager. I'll be going through the GTM Tag Manager. So much more how it's done, less just slides. So bear with me if I'm jumping between different, the decks and then going through the screen share. And at the end, I mean, we're getting, I would say out of the last year and a half, we've had the most questions come in from current customers and others in the ecosystem about what we're offering, what are we doing about it. So I'll share what we have for this transition, which everyone's going to be going this way eventually. The browsers and just general privacy policy is forcing us to go that way in a good way. So when it comes to the agenda, do a quick intro for those that are on here that don't know who I am or who Elevar is. I'm going to go through today's tagging frustration. So I just want to try to frame it and some of the wins that y'all are sharing, like site speed and attribution. So I'll just quickly run through some frustrations that are likely leading to people coming to us asking about the solution. Then we'll jump into the server-side container GTM. So I'll go through a few examples. We'll go through the Facebook Conversions API implementation, how we, Elevar, are approaching the server-side tagging, and then the server-side tagging challenge that we are holding. I know Jeremy was on here. He was in our challenge that we had at the beginning of the year for general analytics, and then open Q&A. I'm going to try to leave a lot of time for Q&A at the end. So don't hold back any questions, although I can't promise I'll be able to answer everything. So just general concepts that you'll learn today. So how GTM server-side container works with a very specific focus on Shopify. How to plan this transition over time. This is not something that you just flip a switch and you'll immediately be on the server-side tagging. So I'll show you exactly how that works and what to expect. And then the nuances of server-side tagging for Facebook. This is super confusing. It can be very, very confusing. So we'll go through that. I mentioned a little bit about what you'll get from this webinar. I don't even like the word webinar, but it is what it is. Zoom, the Zoom meeting. Less theory, more examples, like I said. And I put this Q in here for me. So this is an example. This is our server-side container right here. And I'm giving away a little bit. I'm going to put this server-side container into preview mode. So now this GTM server-side container is in preview mode. I am on our demo store, and I have a data layer event set up that is sending data from our thank you page to our server-side container. We're going to refresh this, and hopefully this is not a complete demo fail. Now we're going to open up the preview mode, and we're going to go to our transaction complete. So this is a transaction. This is the new preview mode, which I'll be going into a little bit of the GTM server-side container. It's showing 2 tags that I've executed. And you can see I have a Facebook purchase. This is sending an event to our Facebook Business Manager account, and it was successful. And now we're going to go over to our Business Manager, and we can see our purchase. So I'm going to clear this just so everyone can see it once again. And I'm going to show you how Facebook even deduplicates this. So again, I know I'm jumping right into the weeds here. However, what I really want everyone to understand is this is going to be, again, very, it's not going to be this super technical all of the time, but I just want to give you guys a little bit of seeing the hands-on work. So I just changed the event ID. I'm going to preview this. So we're back in preview mode in the GTM container. I'm going to refresh the Shopify thank you page. This is going to the server. This is going to our server here. And no event. Man, this is a demo fail. Let's see here. Let's just go back into preview mode here. So we saw the server event come through. Anyways, we saw it there the once. It'll work. I'll get it back in there, but I swear I tested this 3 times right before to make sure it didn't do the demo fail. But this is what you're going to get on this webinar. We'll be going through this in full detail. And I realize, I'm guessing, can you guys see the Facebook Business Manager? Can you guys see? Okay, cool. Thanks, Bill. Just making sure. All right, can you see my slides? Okay, cool. All right. A little bit about me and my why. So I've been in e-commerce myself for 13 years, founded Elvar about 4 years ago. We work with many DTC brands. I know we have many amazing customers on this call today. My passion is analytics. I live and breathe this stuff and was dreaming a lot about it last night. My why, like why do I do all this? Why do I invest so much time? I have 2 sons. They're 2 under 2. And my goal, my why is I want to make all the mistakes I can in business so I can share it with them and really give them a little bit of head start when they get into their careers. And then about Elevar, so a little bit about us, is we specialize, again, if you aren't familiar with us, we specialize in data analysis and tagging. Over 2,500 stores are either using some of our tools or working directly with us. We are official Shopify Plus partners, Google Cloud partner as well. We really provide 3 main benefits, and this is what we work towards on a daily basis, is establishing a trustworthy data foundation, unlocking CRO insights via event tracking, and ensure marketing tag accuracy via monitoring, which is going to be a big shift as the server side world really goes into the norm for everyone on a daily basis. Another thing that this was not in our previous slides this year, but something that I'm very proud of our team is we launched what's called our Elvar Impact Program. This was a goal of ours, a big rock of ours going into 2020, is to establish ourselves more in the community. So our goal is, if you're familiar with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, I just remember from Sports Center when I was a kid. We want to do that on obviously a much smaller scale than what they are, but the goal of enabling one-of-a-kind experiences for under-resourced children. So we've had launched our first one in July, which was awesome. I'm very proud of this for us as a company to give back. Now I'm back on the server side, and that demo fail, I got to come back. I swear I literally tested that 10 minutes before, so maybe we're making some last-minute tweaks there in a container. So the server side for Shopify Technique, basically I'm going to go through in 4 quadrants. Going to talk through site speed benefits, talk through attribution pain points and benefits to this, talk through privacy, the pros and cons, and just general, like how privacy policy or managing privacy policy is going to work in this new server-side world, and then tagging. So everything does come back to tagging. So let's compare today versus the future. So before I even get into today versus the future, our own team gets caught in this all the time, in this nomenclature jargon, even acronym jargon. So there's 3 main ones that I'll likely just be saying off the cuff quite a bit over the next 20 to 30 minutes. Number 1 is client. So client, when it comes to tagging, historically, client is many times referred to as a browser. So you're sending data, quote unquote, client side. And that is generally compared to server side. So, hey, all my tags all my tags are running client side right now. How do I get them running on server side? However, in the world, the way Google runs, there is now a new feature in the server side container type that is called a client. And it is not the same thing, even though it is called the same thing. So that is something that took a little while even for me to wrap my head around. So client that you'll see, and there's a section we'll be going through specifically on this, client in GTM server side does not equal like the client side versus server side. The second one is Apple ITP. I would imagine most everyone on here has at least heard of it in some capacity, but this is essentially just a boil down. I mean, this is the browsers that are really cracking down and enforcing cookie policies and trying to just restrict data collection for third parties and making all of your lives much more difficult trying to manage marketing campaigns. And then first party versus third party context. So first party data is data that's generated by you on servers that you own. Third party data is generated by external sources. So Facebook, the Facebook script generating cookies and setting on your domain even though if you look in the cookies, if for those that are technical and you look in the network panel, you'll see that the cookie is associated to your domain, but it's still being set by Facebook in a third-party context, so it still has a 7-day cookie expiration specifically for Safari. And if you're doing a ton of Facebook advertising, Safari is your dominant browser because of mobile. So how that relates to today versus tomorrow. So in today's world, I'm using Vuori. Vuori is a customer of ours. So Vuori is, their site's loaded up. Their data layer is essentially loaded on their site. The gtm.com/gtm.js, that's essentially Google Tag Manager, the web-based Google Tag Manager. This is executing, it's JavaScript, so it's executing on their site. And then GTM is essentially the conduit at this point, a proxy to execute Facebook or any other tags that are running inside of GTM. At that point, Facebook or other third-party tags are sending a response back. Yes, there will be a recording of this. Sending a response back and setting a cookie. So this is where Facebook, if you ever heard, like see the Facebook click ID, you'll see the cookies that are set back on the browser. And this is where the 7-day expiration comes in. Same thing goes with Google Analytics and any other marketing tag like I mentioned before. So what happens in this circumstance is this use case is exposed to many different things when it comes to data quality. It's exposed to browsers, like I'm just going to beat this horse to death. The 7-day cookie expiration that Safari is enforcing. Ad blockers are blocking this. Logic for tags, so this gets into site speed. This is something that Thomas really had educated me a bit on. Thomas is our head of engineering, for those that don't know him. That was a big difference. When he was going through it was all the logic that the web-based container is handling now, that the web-based container is handling all of that. So filtering, the regex logic, where to trigger things, the data layer variables, all that logic is handled and being executed in this circumstance. So that ends, and then the last one, which everyone pretty much has the same concern, is just the general weight of all of the third-party scripts that are running on, in this case, Vuori and potentially your site as well. So if you have 15 marketing scripts or marketing tags, they're all in GTM potentially, or a mix between GTM and your theme. They're all loading. So if you were to look at like a waterfall view of page speed, you'll see 15 or potentially more requests that are going out, loading that potential library or sending requests to those endpoints. So that's today's process. This is one example. So this is where the server-side process can get really, it can get confusing, and it's going to continue to evolve and change. But this is one example of a server-side process. So in this example, Vuori.com loads, GTM, JavaScript, so your Google Tag Manager web container also loads. I have Vuori.com/gtm.js because you do have the ability to essentially load the Google Tag Manager library from your server, and this is where it can get a little deep quick here, but essentially eventually this will be the way that everyone will do it. So when the Google Tag Manager is running, it is now running in a first-party context. It is not googletagmanager.com/gtm.js. It is collect.yourdomain.com/gtm.js. So just like any other self-hosted JS file. At that point, the data is sent to your server, which is just your URL. So I just use collect.vuori.com as an example here. And then now that data exists in your server-side container, and this is where all the processing starts to happen, and then the tags are triggered from the server-side container, and then potentially a response is set back to the server. So where if just focusing on the attribution side, outside of everything else we'll go through, at the one thing that you're doing here is the server at this point is then intercepting that request. So it can say, oh, we got a cookie from Facebook. It has a 7-day expiration, but we want it to be a 2-year expiration. I'm going to set now this Facebook cookie as a 2-year expiration and send that back to the browser. So now that particular user no longer has a 7-day expiration. They have a 2-year expiration in this example. All the other examples will be going through. So moving the tag logic to the server-side container, moving scripts off of the website and moving that to a server-side container. This is an example of the potential future that we'll be heading to. Deep breath. Why go through all this trouble? So let me just pause real quick to see if we have any questions. Okay, so we got that one. Okay, all right, so yeah, there will be a replay available since there's so much to cover and retain, yeah. I know we're only 10 minutes into it. Okay. Let me get my slides back here. Lost my slides. Okay. Why go through the trouble? There are a couple of folks mentioned site speed pain. So this is a big one. It's been a big push in 2020 in many different fronts. So site speed, and this is again the world of if you want to implement 4 new marketing channels, display partners, affiliates, whatever, the default is, hey, here's my global JavaScript. Just copy and paste this in the top of your theme.liquid. Make sure it's at the top because we don't want to lose any data, and then we're good. And then 6 months later, you have 10 of those. Half of them you're probably not using, and then that can just weigh down your site in many different ways. So this is one pain point that potentially a lot of you are feeling. And then the future, this is definitely more of a 2021 thing, but Google has come out just like they always do. They drive the internet. They drove HD mobile first indexing. Every site needs to be secure. Now every site needs to be fast. So there's 3 metrics that are now going to be included in the page rank, and I won't go off on that tangent, but they said they would give a 6-month notice due to COVID before they implement that, so there's time. But site speed pain is definitely one frustration. The second one is attribution confusion. This is probably the most, I feel it pains me whenever we get these questions or concerns from our customers, because that is like why we're in business is to try to do this, but there's so many different permutations that can cause errors, and it is one of those things that's going to be a moving target for quite a while, and it impacts marketers. So if you're spending money, you've got to know, you need to know how that's performing. I know there's some great tools and partners out there. I think Rockerbox might be on here. I know they're very highly used to help with some of this attribution. But in general, when it comes to the site, like sending data from your site to different third parties, we still need to get that base right. You still need to have that those conversions tracking properly. So the questions we get are Facebook conversion events accurate? This is a recharge thing. We get it seemingly almost daily. With the recharge Facebook integration questions, why is GA never accurate? That's another common one that, again, it's painful to get those and not have the easy fix right away. And then this one has been more something that's come up in Q3 and will continue over the next couple of years, is privacy compliance. So am I compliant? Are my third-party vendors compliant? So that's a big one that server-side container management can help with. So the ultimate goal, I mean, this is, again, one of many potential different examples, but the ultimate goal would be, if you close your eyes and picture, like, how can I solve all those frustrations? Loadviewer.com, we have one single data pipeline. So one data pipeline sending data from your Shopify store to your server-side container. There is consent built in somehow. I won't go into all the different ways, but is the user consent? Are they giving you consent to track them? Or if you don't need to go through that, it's more like an opt-out, similar to CCPA. But essentially, there's that intermediary step of just that consent layer. And then based on the answers yes or no, the data would be sent to your server-side container. And potentially, if you don't have consent or the user is opted out, the data that you can then collect and send to other tools looks much different than those that are opted in. And at that point, from your server-side container, you are then sending data from your server-side container to all the different third parties. Some might send responses back to the browser, some won't. But this is like this would be the magical place to get to, and everything is running properly. Options to manage these requirements today. So again, site speed, attribution, privacy, and tagging is obviously another one. For site speed, I've been on videos like this harping on doing timing and just delaying events from firing a GTM, but generally it's just moving tags out of the theme, move them in the tag manager, and set up some sort of control in GTM to delay things if needed. Removing unused scripts from the theme, so you might go through a site speed audit or something similar and start delaying or either removing or delaying things from executing. And then, like I said, using advanced techniques like timer triggers, and then pausing when not using. For attribution, there's different tools per job. So when it comes to GA, if there are GA consistencies, some might choose to move to GTM or look at other tools like Segment. but in general, it's still susceptible to browser issues that might be blocking some of those requests. And then if you think about Facebook or AdWords or others, you may want to supplement your Facebook pixel with events from GTM or from your theme or from a third party that is enriching your Facebook data. Again, most of these solutions are all susceptible to browser restrictions. And then privacy, OneTrust, no surprise that OneTrust was #1 in Inc. 500 this past year. There's a cookie first and other custom solutions like some of you might have with us with a CCPA set up through GTM. So there are ways that you can go through and implement privacy potentially on a channel by channel basis. But I think that's the one thing that we've seen is CCPA and GDPR is not limited to just Facebook, it's all channels. So with all of that, like just the background on some of the pain points or frustrations, they align with some of the wins that y'all were looking for. Now we'll get into the actual server-side tagging aspect. And I saw a lot of answers where people are saying they're still in the beginner phase of Google Tag Manager. That's okay, that's why we're here, and we can answer questions at the end if anything doesn't quite make sense. But there might be some terms and nomenclature that you're just like, I have no idea what the heck you're talking about. Doesn't mean you have to close out the webinar, because I might come back to it and put that puzzle piece together for you. But a word of caution when it comes to thinking about server-side tagging, it's not a silver bullet. The solution is evolving quickly, so it is a beta feature. My understanding, the way that Google defines beta is it's production ready. I think even Simo mentioned he had this like a server-side tagging solution running on a site that had 10 million visits a day, but the beta flag means it's not feature complete. So the not feature complete means there will be things added to GTM, the server-side container aspect. Browser and privacy legislation that are leading this. This is really leading to this type of solution probably likely to pick up a lot of traction quickly because there's everyone is scrambling both to fight against browsers for attribution issues, but also privacy. And this is another one that I'll get into as we dive deeper into the Facebook Conversion API setup, but this is not a hack. Like this is server-side tagging. Do not look at this as a hack to get around user consent or even ad blockers for that matter. That'll get into more of like philosophical discussion, but it's not a hack or workaround for legal obligations. It can help better equip you, and I'll go into what this means in a little bit. So server-side container overview. So today, if you have a Google Tag Manager account, if you go into your account and go to create a new container, you'll see a new option that is called server-side container. And it does require a Google Cloud account. The process, if you don't have one, the process that Google walks you through is super simple. If you don't have a Google Cloud account, you'll get set up with some sort of free credit for hosting. But again, just remember, like this is a server. Like this is a server that you will own. Elevar won't own it. Shopify wouldn't own it per se. Like you would own this as a business owner. That sounds complicated. Like you're going to need a DevOps person. You're not going to need any of that. Everything is, Google has made it really, really, really easy for beginners to get up and running fairly quickly. But I did want to make a point because that was one point of confusion even I had in the beginning. And then the part that would get maybe a little bit more complex inside of the Google Cloud account would be, they'll give you a default URL. It'll be a random string here, which I'll show here in a second, of that essentially it's your server, the endpoint for your server that you can send data to. But most everyone, you're going to want to set up your own custom subdomain. So it could be like collect.getelevar.com, which we set up as an example. Which I'll show you when I get it back into the server-side container, is there is a new client feature in server-side container that is different. So I guess the easiest way I can explain this, the clients in a non-technical way, is the client inside the server-side container is the feature that is responsible for ingesting the hit that your website is sending to your server-side container, and then making it available for sending to Facebook or AdWords or Snapchat, etc. So the client is basically like picture you as a person where I'll use Ann as an example. So on the website, I'm like, hey Ann, like here's Thomas. He went to the product page. He viewed this product and he added this thing to the cart. Can you do something with that data? Ann will say, okay, great. Yep. So it's Thomas. Here's his ID. Here he added this to cart. Here's the product data that he added to cart. Okay, Facebook, do you want this do you want us to send this data to you? Which the do you want is basically, that's the trigger that you set up in Tag Manager. So Anne in that case would be, she's the one ingesting the request from me and then putting it together to make it available for. I don't know if that makes sense. I just on the fly coming up with that example. But that was one of the steeper learning curves and still is for the new server-side container. The client is also responsible for sending responses back to the user's browser. So if, in this case, with the cookie example I went through a little while ago, if you wanted to reset that cookie, you would send the response back to the browser, and then it would potentially update the headers for that. So going from 7-day to the 2-year example, which I went through. Thanks Jared for answering that question. Yeah, he summed it up. It'll be there. They've stated they'll be supporting others. So the couple things in the server-side container, I'm not at the end. I go through some resources that CMO and a couple others have, and just in regards to like the general overview of server-side containers, that they do a great job going through more like just the technical backbone behind it. But for when it comes to Shopify and e-commerce, the pre-built clients, again, the clients are processing the data, universal analytics, which is what we all know, and then it has an app plus web property type, which is if you are familiar with the measurement protocol, there's an measurement protocol V1 and there's a V2, and all it is just a different structure of the data. So right now, if you've seen the data layer hits where it's like e-commerce.detail and it has all of your product data, the app plus web structure is just a little bit different. I'll leave it at that because it's not super important for today. The differences between the containers. So again, you have a you'll still have a web-based container, and you'll have a new server-side container. Tags in your server-side and your web-based container can be what's essentially pass-through tags from the web container to your server-side container. So all you're doing is essentially taking data that you normally would collect, like a product detail view, and instead of sending that directly to Google, you're sending it to your server-side container. I'm going to show you how that works in a second. Variables are still the foundation for structuring triggers. So if you have spent any time inside of the web-based Tag Manager containers, you might create a trigger that is using some sort of variable, whether it's a page view variable or an event variables like transaction complete, product view. That's still the same foundation. It's just a little bit different variables that are available by default. Preview mode is different, which you already saw some of that, the failed demo in the beginning. And then the web container pointing to a server-side container, which will be your own custom endpoint, which I'm going to show you how that looks here in a second. So this is I think this was one of the aha moments that a few of us have had just in that transition. So universal, I'm going to leave app plus web to the side. Let's not focus on that. We're going to focus everything today on universal analytics, which is what you all are using and what you look at on a daily basis. The data layer, when we're sending a data layer push, so the event, our add to cart event, when we are pushing that event into the data layer, and think product view, any other data layer hits, essentially what GTM is enabling for us is they are sending that request using, if anyone has ever used the hit builder, the Google Analytics hit builder, which is you can just type in a bunch of numbers and you can validate a hit, whether it's a valid hit or not. That's essentially what GTM is doing for us, and it's just sending a URL string to Google Analytics. I know this is getting potentially a little bit in the weeds, but that's essentially what the client is helping do for us in some circumstance. But again, data layer is like our measurement protocol hit, and I'm going to show you how that works in a second. And if you're confused, you're not alone. I had a laugh out loud when I was Googling for these GIFs, and I saw this one, and I think he just sold his gin company for like $3 trillion. So he's probably doesn't have that look on his face anymore. So demo time. All right, so I'm going to pop over into our, can you let me know, Anne or anyone, just let me know if you can see the server-side container on my screen. Perfect. Okay, server-side container looks very, very similar to your web-based container. If we just go back and forth between the two, this is your web. This is our web-based container here, and then we have our server-side container here. The main difference here is our clients, and as I mentioned, the out-of-the-box, when you install or create this container, you will have the universal analytics and our app plus web client available by default. So if we jump into the admin here and just look at your container settings to go through some of the the URL setup that I mentioned, this is where when you decide what URL you want to use, this is where you'd set this in a container, and then this is the out-of-the-box configurations that Google Cloud will give you when you configure it. I'm not going to go really much deeper into this technical side, just based on some of the audience that we have, and it's not helpful when it comes to the frustrations that we're trying to solve for. But this is the general overview of our admin settings and the variables. So I'm going to start with variables because that's where I always like to start. So there are some basic built-in variables. They're different than your web-based variables. I'm just going to focus on a few custom ones that we set up. So many of you, if you've used our Google Tag Manager Suite extension, or sorry, the app, and installed the container in your GTM account, you likely have 50 to 60 variables from us. And the variables have a key, and it's like e-commerce dot action dot whatever. Same concept is here in the server-side container, except the structure of the data layer is a little bit different. And I guess that's the takeaway here is when you want to use variables in tags that you're using inside your server-side container, you would still think about the same process of having variables that you can assign and use in tags. So the Facebook example I did in the beginning, for us, I have two constants. So two constants I'm using. So one is our Facebook pixel ID, one is the Facebook token, and I have an order ID and transaction revenue, and then I have a Google Analytics variable. So the variables that you use in here are different, but the concept, if you are somewhat familiar, is pretty much the same. So if we were to go into our Facebook purchase tag here, and you can just look on the screen where the order ID, so this is the Conversions API request, it's using a variable, and some of these others are hard-coded for demo purposes, but so even though the UI is a little bit different, the concept is still the same, and that's really what I want to make sure that y'all walk away with. Triggers, again, the transaction complete trigger, again, same concept. We're sending an event name in, the event name is transaction complete, and we can use this trigger to fire specific tags that we want to. There are a million different ways you can go through this. These are just, I set up a couple examples, but this is this is a server-side container. Let's jump into the how to send data to our server-side container. I will pause real quick just to look at any questions that are relevant. So short version, we are turning that third party into first party data. That's the big idea behind this. Yes, one of the big ideas is to move to a point where you control what data you're collecting and what data you're sending back to both the browser and also to the third parties. And then, okay, Ray got I think Jared answered that about can you run your own cloud? So will Google not allow you to run your own cloud on Google? The answer was, right now it's just supporting Google out of the box, but they'll be supporting Amazon and others in the future. All right, so how to send data to the server-side container. I think this is the one that probably most are ready for. So option to send data to the server-side container. So option number one is use your web-based container. So this was another aha moment, just trying to unpack how all this works. If you did nothing else and you just wanted to start sending data to your server-side container, you would essentially change nothing about your site as it is today. So all the work that you've put in or we've helped put in and tagging your site and getting the data layer set up and getting events set up, you can leave all of that as is. And there's one small configuration on a variable inside of Google Tag Manager that you are, instead of sending it to Google, you are sending it to your server. So just to show what I mean there, we'll go to, this is our Yeah, this is wrong one. So this is our GTM account. And let's take a look. So we have a few different events that are running, some page view events, then some custom behavior events. Literally didn't change. This is our real container. Didn't change anything. All I did was I made a copy of 4 or 5 events, created one new variable, which I'll show you what that looks like. And if anybody can't see, by the way, if I'm ever like jumping between screens and what I'm saying is not on the screen, just let me know in the chat. So you're not like, what the heck is he talking about? So the server side, all I did here was set this URL to collect that Elevar, and that's it. So that is option number 1 to start sending data to your server-side container. Yes, it is that easy. Number 2, hard coding into your theme. So you could go first full circle where we were 10, 15 years ago with event tracking and start hard coding event tracking into your theme, sending it directly to, so basically not using Google Tag Manager and using your own process to add event tracking. And there's other examples like proxying gtag.js, which you would host on your site, and then you just call that. One question came in, it got my attention. But that's only Google Analytics, right? That change. So the question was, when I was talking about sending data from your server-side, from your web-based container to your server-side container, the question is, but that's only Google Analytics. In that example, yes, it's almost, meanwhile, it's not almost as easy. It's a little bit more difficult to send data. Let's take Facebook, to start sending data, proxying data to your server-side container. So in the example I showed, yes, it is Google. It's not as easy to do that if you want to send Facebook data. I will go through how to take the concept of using Google structured data and using that same data to use for Facebook tags. So I'll come back to that. Jake's question was Elevar's WordPress site, but this applies to Shopify as well. Yeah, 100%. I just used the Elevar site since we've had it up and running for a few months, or it's not a few months, about 3 or 4 weeks, but yeah, it doesn't matter. It's just wherever the GTM is hosted, doesn't matter the site. As a reminder, it is all about your server URL, so that collect.getelevar.com. So most obvious is sending data from your website to your server-side container. So that is the most obvious and easy way to start sending data. But you can, for example, what we've been looking into is a Shopify webhook. So basically, there's a pipeline that goes directly from your Shopify store directly to your server-side container. That's another option. I guess the takeaway here is your server-side container, it can accept any data from anywhere. I'll use like June Oven as an example, that smart oven. If they had a data pipeline they want to send from usage there and send it to their server-side container, they could do that. And the one takeaway, you'll keep hearing this over and over again, is clients inside of server-side Google Tag Manager, they're required for processing data. So if you wanted to use a unique request URL for like oven, would be data coming from your oven. Website could be /website. So that's getting too much in the weeds when it comes into clients, but that's the big takeaway here is if you are sending different types of data from wherever into your server-side container, in general, you would want to have one client that is there to, again, process and digest that data. This has been another question that we've gotten a lot, and I've seen on just other webinars, is the data layer needed? The straight answer is yes. I mean, you could, technically, no. If you want to go through and create your own process for translating your Shopify data and user data and writing that inline and sending it, you can do that. For most of you, most everyone, it's data layer is just going to make your life easier. And you don't, just because you are structuring your data in a data layer doesn't mean that you have to always route that through Google Tag Manager per se. But the data layer, you are still going to need that process of translating data from somebody viewing a product, like what's the product name, what's the product SKU, what's the price, translating that into a format that can be sent to your server-side container. This is just a little visual. Again, Viori, they didn't sponsor this webinar, but they're on every slide. I don't know if Jamie's on here. If she is, hi. But taking the Viori site, the data layer is running on Viori, and we're using the web-based container. It's probably pretty small on the screen, but you can see we're using that server-side variable. So it's just, again, instead of sending it straight to Google, sending it to the server-side container, and then the server-side container is sending that data to Google Analytics. So that's the data layer answer. The hard-coded version. So this is an example sending pixel hits to your container. So let me jump over to Shopify admin. So this is on the thank you page, and this is an image. So those are a little bit more technical. This is basically just an image. I have my URL set here, and if this URL doesn't look familiar, or the string, because it's a bunch of googly gop or whatever you call it, it's a mix. It is the measurement protocol that I showed a couple slides ago, that you can just take this. So I could, if this didn't have the Shopify variables, I could literally just take this, copy it into my browser, and send a hit, which it actually, this did send a hit to my server-side container. The way it was structured, there's no client to accept that request. But this is another way that you can, again, if you want to go the hard coding route across your site, this is a way you can just use an image pixel and set your variables and send this data to your server-side container. It is not privacy compliant. So if you have any CCPA or any sort of consent management, that would essentially bypass it, especially if you are sending user-specific data. And in Europe, even things, I believe there are even like some order IDs or other variables might be considered unique consent for that. I see some questions coming in. I'm going to come back to those in a second. So I'm about to jump into a demo. So we'll review, we're going to look at our marketing site and the data flowing from our web-based container to the server-side container. So just go back to our web-based container. Again, just to reset, even though Elevar is on a WordPress site, the concept is still the same, and I'll use our Shopify demo site as well. It's just, we just have more traffic coming through the site, so it's easier to show. But the tags that we have set up here, so we have general site-wide page view tracking, and a few just behavior events that we're sending. So let's look at the main navigation. So this is an event, custom event, tracking people clicking on our main navigation. Again, this is sending data to our server-side container. Let's jump over to the server-side container and look at our tag. So I have a Google Analytics tag here, and this tag is accepting the data coming from the marketing site or the Shopify demo site, saying, okay, I see that someone clicked on a main navigation hit. That is a Google Analytics hit. I'm going to take it, and I'm going to essentially, as I mentioned a few slides ago, this is a pass-through tag. So all the server-side container is doing at this point is saying it's good. The client, so the client that I've talked a lot about, has done all the processing. So if I wanted to manipulate the data in any way, the client's already done that, made it available, and then the trigger. So the trigger for this particular tag is saying when the client name equals Universal Analytics. Again, I'm not going to get into like the super granular specifics on this because I'll run out of time. But this is essentially sending that data off to analytics. So now if I pull up Google Analytics and we look at this is our server-side property, and let's just go back in time so you can see I'm not cheating. We can see when we started receiving data. So we started seeing data that weekend, went deep in the server-side land one weekend. Started seeing data, and then these are the 5 events that we're piping data from our site to our server-side container. And if we go into our header, we can see some of the main navigation clicks, and we'll see some of this activity. So this is, again, showing how simple it is if you just want to like just test things out and see how the data can flow to a new container. This is as easy as it is. Let's go back to, we'll review, okay. So that is an overview on how to send data from our marketing website by basically taking our web-based container, duplicating the tags, changing the variable to our server-side container variable ID, and then sending it over to the server-side property that I created for analytics. Facebook Conversions API is up next. I will pause. I see a bunch of questions. So let's just go through these. All right, so the first question on the client side, due to a shared cookie across all websites, Google Analytics knew more information about the visitor. Site, I haven't read this, but someone said, Myrtle, you're setting me up for a zinger here. Site A never asked their age, but site B did, so both sites benefit from this info, and Google is able to make correlations that one site can't, one site alone can't. I'm gonna drop this into the chat just so everybody can see. So that's the question, if anybody wants to see. How does this get handled when working on server side? Does it affect the effectiveness of ads? All right, I'm gonna punt on this one. I'll come back to this at the end after we go through the Facebook Conversion API, which may answer some of these questions. Or I don't know the answer, but give me, I'll come back to it at the end, Myrtle. All right, so next question. How does Facebook set a unique identifier for you when they see you multiple times? Is this from some of the header information? Good question. In terms of like how Facebook is doing their fingerprinting and identifying, we don't really know. I mean, I don't think we'll ever really know. All I can say is in your standard setup today, when you have their pixel running, your pixel is executing, or their pixel is executing, and then it's essentially sending that request to the Facebook, and then they're doing whatever magic they're doing, and then sending a response back and setting cookie headers or whatever else that they're doing. But so I don't know how Facebook will set a unique identifier other than normally when you think about unique identifiers, especially with Google Analytics, it's generally like device based, but with Facebook having OAuth and just general login information, there's likely other things that they're doing that we don't have. I don't necessarily have the concrete answer to. When they see you multiple times, so I'll show you in Safari here in a second. We'll actually look at their cookie. I'll show you how that works. If I'm refreshing the page or going through the page, you can see that the cookie isn't refreshing every time I reload. All right, so Facebook Conversion API. So first, what is a Facebook Conversion API? In short, it allows you to send standard or custom conversions to Facebook, what's called server side. So that's outside the browser. And one thing, it is not just purchase conversions. You can send any of your standard conversions or any custom conversions. So if you want to send content, view content, or add to cart, or subscriptions, or anything you want, you can send it to the Facebook Conversion API. There are 2 required parameters to send with a server side hit. And Facebook will handle a deduplication. So if you wanted to keep your pixel running in parallel and still send view content, and hence the view content hits through the through your web-based container or through your native Shopify Facebook pixel, you can do that. And you can also run the Facebook Conversion API in parallel, as long as you were sending, again, 2 parameters that they need to deduplicate versus duplicating and causing some of your attribution to go haywire. Why use the Facebook Conversions API? I know at least some of our customers, Facebook's been reaching out to them proactively about getting them onto this. Number 1, controlling the data that you are sending, so explicit versus implicit consent. Number 2, can send data up to 7 days, or send up to 7 days of historical data. So if you want to send data from 5 days ago, or send conversions from 5 days ago to catch up, you can do that. And then just the obvious, if a browser is only collecting 70, 80% of conversion data, because of all the different reasons we've discussed, then the Conversions API can help fill that gap to get you hopefully more to that whole number of 100%. Facebook pixel versus conversions. So this is one that, again, is might be a little bit of an aha moment. So your Facebook, what everyone calls a pixel, that does not equal the Facebook Conversions API, nor is one a replacement for the other. So a Facebook pixel is that's the main pixel that's measuring all of the activity that a user is doing and collecting other data to be used in their own remarketing and measurement processes. But the Facebook Conversions API, these events are defined by you. Most of us, if you're on Shopify and e-commerce, you're using the standard view content, add to cart, initiate checkout, lead, purchase, maybe a couple other custom ones. But it is not the same. You're not sending potentially that same page view based data or user based data that the pixel is doing. So Facebook pixel versus conversions, you have your site, you have your global tag running, the global pixel, you have your Facebook Conversion API. They're both sending data to the Facebook business account. So how does this start to play into attribution? The Facebook pixel can be proxied through the server-side container. So the cookie is reset from a 7-day cookie to the 2-year, whatever the expiration date. So if you still wanted to run your Facebook pixel on your site, but the only thing you wanted to do was you just wanted to get around that 7-day expiration, then you can, instead of having all the data come, basically all the response coming back from Facebook.com and setting all of the headers, you are essentially would route the same Facebook pixel as we all know it, route that through your server-side container and then back to the site, and that's where you're in theory resetting that cookie and setting that to be the 2-year expiration. The Facebook Conversions API, so if let's say you have a big gap in conversions, or you don't trust the conversions, or you want to try to make yourself whole in Facebook, the Conversions API, you can set up the process to let's say you just want to send purchases and that's it. You can set up send data from your Shopify site to your server-side container, and then set up a tag inside your server-side container that is only the Facebook purchase, which I showed. And there's only 2 or 3 parameters that Facebook requires that you pass with that event for deduplication and for their attribution, which comes back to the Facebook click ID. So that's like probably the first step to getting into the Conversions API. And then the hashed advanced matching. So again, Facebook does or automates some of this, and then there's the manual advanced matching, which we have in our containers. Again, consent, I'm not gonna talk about consent, but assuming if you have consent or you're not in that realm of needing to get a consent, then you can also pass your user parameter data with your Conversion API events. So Facebook, again, has that advanced matching process in place, just like you would with your pixel. So this again is how Facebook tagging works today. So you have viewer.com, Facebook pixel runs, goes to the Facebook servers, data collection, whatever they're doing, whatever voodoo they're doing, and then they're coming back and setting whatever headers that they want. And this is the cookies, the most common one we're talking about. The potential is one I just went through. So we're basically interjecting the server-side container, and then the server-side container is sending a response back to viewer.com and saying, okay, well, I got the cookie, but I don't want 7 days. I want this to be 2 years. So that's what your server-side container would do in this circumstance. Demo time. I'm scared about this one because I don't know why the initial demo did not work. So I'm going to walk through a Safari example just to show you all what I'm referring to. I'll walk through the Shopify store, Facebook request again, and then extending a pixel lifetime if we have time. I know we're up to 60 minutes here, and there's a little bit more to go through here, and I want to save time for questions. So first, let's open up Safari. So can you all just give me a yes or no if you can see Safari and see Vuori up on your screen? No? Okay. Give me 1 second. Let's share. Okay, how about now? Can you see Safari? Still no? Okay, yes. Okay, perfect. All right, so this is Vuori, and let's look at our cookies. So I loaded this up a little bit before getting started, and we're just going to focus on, for now, we're going to focus on our Facebook cookie. So you'll see on the vuoriclothing.com domain, we have one of the Facebook cookies here, and we'll see it expires at 9:23. So when I loaded this up this morning, at 9:30, it basically set that 7-day. So let's just go through. I'm gonna delete all of our cookies here, just so y'all can see how this works. And I'm expecting to see another Facebook cookie set, and the expiration should be about 1 p.m. Eastern. I'll wait for everything to load up here. All right, so here's our Facebook cookie, and in the super small print, you can see 9/23, so 7 days from now at 1 p.m. And you can see most cookies are being set to this. And again, this is Safari doing that enforcement. So to go back to one of the questions earlier about Facebook knowing, not knowing you. So this is the classic example of many different circumstances. So it's somebody sees an ad, clicks on an ad, and then comes through on a different device, or just comes back 8 days later. So they're seeing remarketing campaigns, clicking on the ad, coming back to your site 8 days later. Their cookies have been reset if they're on their phone or on Safari on a desktop. Cookies have been reset, so now we're not experts in Facebook marketing. We're experts in Facebook tagging. This is where it's going to get into more of the digital marketing experts that are on a call of how you'd interpret that particular user. So are you essentially not going to, they might be bucketed in different campaigns. So they're no longer in, okay, they've done X, Y, and Z on the site, so let's show them this. They've never done anything. So they're going to start seeing these other remarketing ads. So there was another, I think, question like, or the wins for the day would be understanding like how this can potentially improve your remarketing or just general Facebook ad campaigns. I think just to try to keep it simple here, it's if this is a big pain point, either attribution on campaigns or just you have a longer sales cycle, so it's not likely someone's going to come in and purchase within 7 days. Let's say your time to purchase is more like 21, 30 or extended. This is where it might become a little bit more of a head scratcher to understand how campaign performance is actually doing for you. If you aren't using one of the like another third-party attribution service or tool like the Rockerbox I mentioned earlier or others, this is going to help keep some of that historical data that you historically have had on user performance to target the right people at the right stage in the funnel. Again, we could probably talk all day about this on our marketing side. Maybe we'll do another one that just focuses on how this affects the data that you'd use in Facebook in different audiences. But that is the way, like that 8 days, someone is essentially they're out of the audience and into a new prospecting type of audience or top of the funnel audience. Yeah. That's so the one comment just came in. This is why my Just Uno banners are firing when they are not supposed to. This could be a reason. It could be different. There's so many different examples with browsers and pop-ups and why they're showing or not showing. But yeah, A/B tests. So if you're running tests in Google Optimize, definitely impacts anything that relies on some knowledge of the history of a user to control what triggers or what to show, what not to show, when to show it. All of those services are impacted by the 7-day cookie expiration. All right, I am going to pause the screen share so I can get back to our main one. Okay. If y'all could just let me know, can you see the demo time, the slides again? If you just give me a yay or nay on that. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's go back to our Shopify store. So this is the purchase conversion. So I use some Shopify variables here, and then just a couple are like hard code examples. But so let's put ourselves in a scenario of, okay, I want to start sending purchases from my Shopify store to my Facebook account through the Conversions API. And let's say this is the route that you choose to take. So we have this, assume these are all variables, not hard coded. This is now executing just like you see our data layer down here. This is now executing anytime someone completes a purchase, but is not being routed through Google Tag Manager. So this executes And we'll go back here to our thank you page. I'll reload this. And I'm actually going to leave preview mode just to make sure I don't have any GTM oddities here with our thank you page. All right, so we're going to reload this page, and we're going to make sure we have our preview mode set up. So again, just for those that weren't on the very beginning, we have the our server-side container here. We have a Facebook purchase tag. This is using the Conversions API request that we're sending. They give us, so there's a test event code that we can use to send data, test data to our Facebook account. And we're triggering based on the transaction complete. So this is the transaction complete event. So let's just take this and kind of back our way through Shopify. So this is, again, the event name, if you can see this, the event name is purchase. So we only want this request sent to Facebook when a purchase happens. We have a couple of variables and just dummy data in here. And let's search for the transaction complete. So you'll see this request that we're sending from your Shopify store to your server-side container. This is the event action transaction complete. Your server-side container, in this case my server-side container, is doing the heavy lifting of translating this request for me, so I can use it as a trigger and use the variables in the tag sent. So when we reload this page, just like it would a normal circumstance, we expect that pixel to load, sends the request to the server-side container. The server-side container is picking it up, running it through the process, and we can see if we look at our transaction complete event that executed, we can see the tags that fired. We have two, so we have a universal analytics tag and a Facebook purchase tag. So these events have both executed. And now we can actually start going through the data that we sent with that hit. So these are all, if we remember from about 15 or 20 minutes ago, these are the variables I was walking through in the server-side container. We have our pixel ID, we have the token, we have our order ID. So this is the order ID coming from Shopify. And then a couple other standard ones that are coming through. The event data, so this is actually when I mentioned that Google Tag Manager is doing the heavy lifting of translating the measurement protocol hit, which, just to back our way into it, the measurement protocol hit is this. This is that collect.getelevar.com. It's just a URL string. We're just sending that. Tag Manager is doing the heavy lifting of translating that. Sorry, I'm bouncing around a lot of screens. Translating that into this event data. The data is not sent. This is the second version of the measurement protocol where the items are being broken down here. So you can see the test data that I have here. But Tag Manager is doing all this heavy lifting, and then we're able to use those variables and send them in the request sent out to Facebook. So if we look at the outbound HTTP request, this is what we sent to Facebook, contains the data that we just went through. And man, I don't know why it is not coming through here after working for about 100 times testing. Let's see here. So I'm not gonna waste too much time doing this, but let's just do this one more time, make sure we didn't update this. View our changes. All right, so we're going to go back here, preview, reload. See the request. Request was sent. It was a successful request. That's a good thing about preview mode, is you'll be able to see if there was an error. If something, let's say Facebook came back and said, no, this request isn't valid, they would send an error back. All right, finally. So something I must have changed something before. So now, excuse me, now this is in our Elevar account, our server pixel. The missing product parameters. So this is, we're supposed to send some product data. Oh, I know what the issue was. I never changed things before a call. This used to be called like a server-side test purchase, and I changed it to be the normal Facebook purchase. Anyways, the hit came through. We now successfully went through the process of taking a hit purchase from our Shopify store, sending it to our server-side container, manipulating that data, putting it into a Facebook request. Now that request sent the data to my Facebook account, where now I have events coming from browser and server, and this would just start stacking up over time. Again, the error here is because I didn't include any of the product parameter data required for purchases, but it's there, it works, you can see. So that is the Facebook conversion walkthrough. Just quickly go through the last couple of things here. Privacy. So I showed the screen in the beginning. So number one, consult with your legal team on how you should be handling it, whether you're in EU or California or just have customers from those areas. Essentially, again, just to repeat what the earlier is, with server-side containers, you can have that one flag. So those that are using our CCPA flag, we can use that same process to send that flag to the server-side container, like this person's opted out, and then that is essentially a piece of data or variable that we can use in a server-side container to then set that flag in all of your tags, so Facebook, AdWords, etc. So that's like the main thing here is just putting that little layer in between your site and the server-side container. When it comes to tagging your site, so we've gone through this a lot. The server-side container, everyone is pretty much going to be running this in parallel with whatever mechanism you're using today for tagging, whether it's the web-based container or if you have everything hard-coded in your theme or using the native Shopify setup. But how can you get up and running on the server-side setup is the example I showed, just duplicating the tags, changing the transport URL for the variable. We have some templates. We'll be rolling out more templates. Oops. Thank you. Good thing there's no notes. There's no notes here. Let me switch the screen here. Appreciate. Can you just see the main screen? Should be all. Someone just give me a heads up. Okay, cool. Yeah, so running server side in parallel, reducing the time. So if again, all of us don't have much time, and if you need, if you want to ramp up that time to send more data into a server side container, then this is what I use for even our own site, is using the Chrome extension. This is our Elevar Chrome extension. And if we just pop over to Viori here, and we'll reload. Hopefully everyone can see my screen here once it loads up. I got too many things running in the browser here. So the Chrome extension, if you haven't ever used this before, we've made, or if you have used it, there's 4 main triggers that you can use here. So click-based trigger. So if you want the example I showed in the main navigation, if you wanted to use this to start sending data to your main GA account or to server side, you could just point, click, go through, add whatever logic you want to do, add your Google Analytics tag. We're adding additional tag types like Klaviyo, Facebook, etc. And then this does all the dirty work of building the event, building the tag, building a trigger, and then assigning that Google Analytics variable that you need. So that can speed up the process to get some additional custom tagging in. And then the other thing that is probably going to be evolving pretty quickly is if you were running all of your data from your web container running through the server-side container, and everything is executing just like I showed with a Facebook request, and there's no response going back to the server on what request you just sent, pixel helpers as you know them today will not work. So you will not be able to open up the Facebook pixel helper to see what data was sent. I would imagine Facebook is likely to roll out something. There'll be other community templates out there as well. But this is likely one potential downside to server-side tagging is it is a little bit more of a black box where your requests are going. So you won't be able to just go through and QA your site through the Tag Assistant or Facebook Pixel Helper. Obviously, this will evolve, so there might be some new solutions, but as we know today, they wouldn't work. So again, if this is where monitoring comes in. So what we're doing is working on making sure that monitoring will work for a server-side container. Monitoring, as if you were to set up a server-side container today, our monitoring will still work and it'll pick up data layer variables. So if there's any errors, or any tags are breaking, it'll pick up on most of those tag errors and all the data layer variable errors. So it can really help give you the eyes into how your server-side container is performing. Let me just pause here for questions. You said this doesn't show in Pixel Helper. Okay, so the question Miracle asked, you said this doesn't show in Pixel Helper, but does it show in the test events tool? Yes, inside of Facebook, like if we just pop over here, it would still show inside here. Yep. That is a great question. So what are your options? Again, this is the number one question we've been getting. There's a lot. There's potentially a lot of different options. So option number one, do it yourself. So there aren't a ton of resources out there yet. There will be more, I would assume. For those that don't know Seam, I'm sure everyone that has some GTM experience is familiar. He's got a ton of great guides. He's got a couple good YouTube videos of his own webinars that was a little bit probably more like technical, focused on the server-side container, not as focused as much on Shopify per se. So they're there. They can, with some dirty work, get up and running. You can also just wait and see how the solution evolves. So if you don't have those main pain points, it's probably not worth going through all the effort to switch over just to do it. You can obviously, but if leave it up to you. And then as I mentioned, if you have existing pain points with attribution or conversions, where you don't fall into that bucket of everything is good, like I just want to learn how it works, but you do fall into the segment of I have a lot of pain with attribution, or just general data management or tagging, then what we are doing on the Elevar side is we have two different options. So we are doing a new challenge. We did two in the beginning of the year. So the challenge that starts on September 28th, it's 10 days. Basically what we're doing on for 10 days is going through a lot of what I just went through, about bite-sized chunks of day number one, we're going to execute this task. Day number two, we're going to execute this task. And it'll go through the process of creating your container, setting up the URL, getting data in the server-side container, getting your Facebook Conversion API set up, all of that. It's a one-time fee, $95 if anybody wants to do that. There'll be daily videos of me going through with the daily tactic for the day. We'll do a couple live Q&A. So I know we have a couple people from the first challenge, but we can bring you on, ask questions. So if you're stuck somewhere, then we can dig in. So I'm pretty excited about that. It's been a while since we did the challenge. I enjoyed those when we did a couple in the first quarter of the year. And then for those that are just like, can you just figure out, just do it for us. We don't want to touch it. We don't have the expertise. We do have a limited number of options based on our capacity. So if that is something that you just want to move everything over in a server-side container, have things running in parallel with a Pixel, and really get yourself set up for the full server-side benefits, then we do have that option, which some details are here. And if you have any questions on that, you can just let me know, or we can hop on a call, myself or Abby or others. And then that is essentially the answer to the question. I know we've been getting a lot of what is Elevar going to do with server-side tagging. This is it. So we'll continue to put out more content as much as we can. Obviously, I know some folks from Shopify are on here as well. Anticipating there'll be some Facebook updates or integrations coming from Shopify as well. But again, the server-side tagging for us, it is not just Facebook, even though that was what I focused on today. Everything is focused on, it's every tag, AdWords, Facebook, Snapchat, etc. So for those that are interested, let me just drop the URL into the tagging challenge, and then I am ready to answer as many questions as you all have. So I know there's a couple, Radul, I'll come back to you. So there's a server-side tagging challenge link if anyone wants to sign up for that. Okay, the challenge starts on Monday, September 8th, so a week and a half from now. There'll be some things we'll send out probably mid to late next week to get you started. And then, yeah, we'll get you all set up. So let me just, for a brand new e-commerce site. So I'll go through some of the chat questions first that came through, and I'll go through the Q&A. So if you have any questions, drop them preferably in the Q&A so I don't get lost in the chat. All right, so Jake, when does the challenge start? September 28th, so Monday, September 28th. For a brand new e-commerce site, do you recommend implementing the server-side GTM now or a regular GTM and server-side GTM side by side? That is a great question. The part of me that loves being on the cutting edge, I would say run in parallel, but honestly, if it's a brand new e-commerce site, I don't know if it's a brand new brand or it's just a new site. It's just one more thing to worry about outside of a new site launch. So I'd probably advise against doing it right away. Again, you saw how easy it is to get up and running in parallel. So that's my answer to the question, Baron, on doing it in conjunction with launching a brand new site. It won't be a big ROI for you. The question on the 2,500 monthly fee or one-off. It is just a one-off, so it'd be 2,500. That's just a one fee for the 12 months. Yep, a couple questions on that one. What is the fee for 12 months? 2,500 for 12 months. Cody just finished implementation with her team. Super impressed, how professional. Thank you very much. That was great to hear. I know we have some team members on here, and if you all have seen Ann, Mario, Katie, Patrick, they're amazing. All right, so we got a lot of questions rolling in here. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to come back to Raduls, your question on the client side. So the question was, on the client side, do a shared cookie across all websites. Due to a shared cookie across all websites, Google Analytics knew more information about the visitor. Site A never asked their age, but site B did. So both sites benefit from this info when Google is able to make correlations that one site alone can't. How does this get handled when working on server side? Does it affect the effectiveness of the ads? Okay, now that I have a little more clear brain, the question makes sense. If both sites are using the same Google Analytics property, nothing really changes because you are essentially in this example, you have two different websites. They're both running some capacity data collection, let's just say Google Tag Manager, with a Google Analytics property ID on the site, funneling them through to your server-side container. That it's going through the same process. So the data collection is going through the same process, and then that request that you're sending out from the server-side container, if ultimately you're sending that back to the Google Analytics property ID instead of having it sent through the browser, it doesn't really change the process that's in place today, unless you set the client. So in this case, if you wanted to say, okay, client, someone that comes from site A, if they answer a user-specific question like age or demographic, we don't want that to pass through, then that would be like the logic for that use case. If you wanted to restrict it, you would have to build that into the client inside the server-side container for GTM. In terms of the effectiveness of the ads, again, it goes back into what I mentioned with the Facebook conversions. Again, if everything is the same, you're just routing everything through the server-side container instead of the browser, nothing in theory should change unless you're resetting the the GA cookie for a longer lifetime value, then that would, in theory, improve. Next, have you talked about an example of changing the 7 days limitation in Safari thanks to server-side? Yes. So you may have jumped on late. So we did go through the example of using either Google Analytics or your Facebook client in the server-side container and intercepting the request that your site would be sending to Facebook and saying, hey, I see it's the cookie that Facebook set is 7 days. I'm the server, I own this. I own your site, I own the tracking. I'm resetting that to 2 years. And then the server your server would send that response back to the browser and update that cookie expiration value. We did go through that, obviously probably surface level, but yeah, so that potential is possible. Thomas set up an example right before the call. I didn't test it, and I already had one fail on the initial. I'll send the example out that Thomas set up that he was simulating that process on Safari, so you all can potentially see how that works in real life. Jeremy's question, should I not be using Shopify Facebook Pixel and move the Pixel to GTM? No, I mean, Jeremy, you know, just from other challenges, things we've done. I mean, our default is the out-of-the-box implementation for Shopify and Facebook. The Pixel today and even analytics, it works fine. Does it have some people call them gaps? Yes, but it for Google Analytics specifically, a lot of those you can add that additional data through Google Tag Manager. And when it comes to Shopify Facebook Pixel, again, I wouldn't change anything there. I'm assuming Shopify is coming out with some updates to get ahead of this move where browsers are really restricting data collection. So if anything, if your concern, Jeremy, is that you are not getting your conversion data in Facebook for attribution, then the first place I would start is leave Shopify Facebook Pixel as it is. It works great, and basically amend that data through the Facebook Conversion API again, because Facebook already has the process to deduplicate. So that's the other big thing that's really cool about this is it's not an all or nothing thing. You can run things in parallel and let some of the platforms deduplicate to have the capability. So yeah, do not shut off your Shopify Facebook Pixel just to set up in GTM at this point. Because if you've seen through the last challenge, if you want to send a custom event through GTM, like for watching a video or doing something else, you can do that in GTM while keeping the Shopify Facebook Pixel in place. Strange question. But when you are too small to undertake, when are you too small to undertake this? We're launching a new company, 3 SKUs to start, but have the ability to scale rapidly given the target audience and price point. I see massive benefits to this for building lookalike and custom audiences in Facebook to keep the new customer flow, not a repeat purchase product, but am I biting off more than I can chew? Yeah, you're definitely not the only person that'll have that question, Zach. 3 SKUs will make it a little bit easier. So again, assuming that you are on Shopify, in this case, I would still just use the native Shopify Facebook built-in pixel. And and I don't know if you have a Facebook rep yet, but some that we're working with, you can set up a second Facebook pixel. They'll basically approve you to set up a second Facebook pixel, and then you can run this setup in parallel and do a comparison. So if you wanted to compare audiences between the two, you could do that. In terms of again, it really depends on if it's a very short decision point from somebody seeing the product and then purchasing, or is it a longer decision phase? Then if it's a longer decision phase, then I would potentially look at the options to control when your audience's cookie is reset. If you're driving a ton of prospecting through mobile, that's going to end up on Safari. So I do see, again, I see benefits. It's probably to that point when you're getting ready to scale that it would make sense to run those in parallel and just do some comparison. But everyone's different. That's just my opinion. I know, again, we don't live in marketing on a day-to-day basis, so some marketers are probably like, we need to do this right now because I know the impact or I know the potential value. I've heard secondhand from other folks, other brands, where Facebook has told them the performance differences, but Facebook might have some different reasons for saying that. But it's very very subjective question. So I don't know if that helped or not. But great question. Butting off more you can chew, again, same thing. If you're launching a new site, there's so many other things that are likely more important initially when launching a new site before going super advanced like this. In terms of size, I don't think there's a revenue amount where it does make sense or doesn't make sense. It probably comes back to ROI, like what your ad ROI is, and if you feel like you're not getting enough out of it, versus looking at you need to be $1 million revenue or something like that. Judd, great question. What are the estimated costs to operate the Google Cloud server? With this being so new, there aren't many out there. From what I've just read or seen in other groups that I'm in, just based on people that have it up and running on other sites, it's pretty small. I think I don't know what the credit is for new customers. It's like $150 or $200 credit. You're probably going to be less. Most sites, I believe, and Thomas on our team we talked about this a while back, but probably $100. I don't see anyone at the volume getting into anywhere near 500 to 1,000. So it's more than likely going to be less than $100. Do I have to worry about Klaviyo, Justuno, and other cookies if doing server side? Yes. Yeah. short answer. Yeah, I think Klaviyo, since we have some built-in integrations to send data to Klaviyo, it'd be the framework or the process of doing what I showed with Facebook and also potentially doing that with Klaviyo could work in the same manner. So again, I think that's one thing I just want to be clear is this isn't meant to scare anybody that your data is a mess. I think for me, since Chrome has even come out and said like when they're enforcing their cookies, this is just a reality that we will be getting to eventually. We like to be early adopters, and a lot of people come to us for asking what we think about it. So you don't need to blow up everything that you're doing today. But again, anything that's collecting user data and using that to perform some sort of action, moving them to a server-side process where you have more control over the data collection and their cookie expert or anything that relies on cookie data for behavior, you will benefit from that. Another question about costs. Hopefully, I answered that one. With a client accepting and manipulating data on the server side, or cookies rewritten each session? That's a great question, Sean. I'm gonna double check with Thomas. I don't think so, but let me confirm. That is a good question. Let's see if I missed anything. Simon, I'll get back to your question about white labeling solution. In general, the solutions that we provide aren't white label enable, or they're not necessarily possible to enable white label since most of it's an app on the Shopify App Store. But I can reach out to you after just to get a little more context on that. Let me check the chat to see any other questions. So Jake, I'm also looking for a unified dashboard. Is Segment the industry standard for client dashboards? GA is a little rough on our clients to dig into. I don't know. I know we're at 1:30. I'm not sure if you're still on here, but if you're talking about unified dashboard for all of your, if you're digital marketing or growth professional, and you want to have a unified dashboard of all of your customers to roll up into, was that your question? Okay, cool. Still here. Segment won't do that. Segment is the way I compare Segment is with GTM with server side. GTM plus Elevar is like you compare us to Segment. So Segment is essentially they have like their persona data feature inside there, but it doesn't enable dashboarding per se. So I don't know if that answers the question, at least about Segment. Segment is more about like you tag your site once, kind of like we think about with data layer, tag your site once with your behavior data and user data, and then inside of Segment, you map to different destinations. So you send it to Facebook, send it to analytics, send it to wherever. For e-commerce, it's pretty much, we set that foundation for the sites, and then inside of Tag Manager with our templates, you just put your account ID, and then it sends the data to the different channels. In terms of unified dashboard, I think for like single, maybe I have to check with Dacity. Maybe Dacity might have a better recommendation just off the cuff than I will, but I'll connect you with someone there to see either if they do that, just essentially merging data from multiple sources together. So that might be an option. Supermetrics, I know we have some customers, heavy users with Supermetrics to help do everything in Data Studio. So that's another way. Yeah, it's a comment. I know what you're looking for. Yes, let me think a little about that one. Again, Supermetrics can help do that compilation. Data Studio is a way you can blend data. So I know we have one customer. I won't name names, but we've helped in Data Studio help them. And they've been doing most of the work on it, but merging data from like 25 different properties across different sites in Europe. So Data Studio has the power to do as well. IBM Watson, maybe I'm not too familiar with I know IBM Watson, but I'm not familiar with how they would potentially control data or dashboarding. Bill has a couple questions. So look, like, will Google Learning benefit, non-benefit? I think it's Bill. Can you clarify that question if you're still on? You had a comment like, will Google Learning benefit, non-benefit? I'm not quite sure what that one is. Yeah, Sean, credit. The credit that I'm aware of, so Alexander, the credit from Google is a one-time credit. If it's regarding the challenge, the $95 is just a one-time. It's just like an entry fee to the challenge, just for accountability's sake. The Jake had a great share here. I'll copy this back in. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Jake. So I just copied in from Jake. So he's been running Google Cloud a few years with JavaScript calls and never paid a single dime past my free credit. Yeah, I would imagine most might fall into that as well. So that's a great share. Okay, wasn't an earlier question. Guy was asking about multiple websites with one passing age. Okay, cool. Thanks, Bill. All right, let me just double check the Q&A, see if I have any else come in. All right, got a couple more in here. So Brian, can a server-side container be imported into GTM? We actually honestly haven't even tested that. Assuming if it's not there, it will be eventually. Yeah, so you can. It's here. We frankly haven't tested it ourselves yet, but it is there. There's a template library, so we have some templates in the web-based or the web container library for monitoring. Google has the same template library for the server side. There's just nothing in there yet. Nothing's been approved. So yeah, most of our templates that we'll be working on, it'll be in the same structure as a web-based container where everything is pre-mapped and it can be imported. The second question, if using Google Cloud for server-side tagging, can that data only be used with BigQuery for a data warehouse? That is a good question. That is something I don't necessarily have an answer for. Again, if you have any technical expertise, then again, you're sending the data as your server, so there potentially could be, think about a client like sending data. If you want to send data to BigQuery, if you want to send data to like an Amazon data warehouse, I'm guessing in theory you could potentially do that as well. But Brian, let me know if I answered your question on both of those that you had. With the client, another question, with the client accepting and manipulating data on the server side, are cookies oh, sorry, I already answered that one. All right, any last questions? Last comments? So I will, we'll be sharing the replay for this, and we'll send out, and there's a couple questions, follow up. We'll send the PDF, send the example, the Thomas Pixel example that I mentioned. I'll give 10 seconds for any last questions. Appreciate everyone hanging on here. And all right. Alexander says, my brain hurts. Yes, hopefully learned a little bit. Appreciate your time. Everyone have a great rest of your day and week. And sure, I will talk to everyone soon. There's still a few comments. I'll let the comments come through. Yeah, Jake, no idea about this, and now I understand the pain points, why I consider it. Yeah, cool. All right, everyone, thanks. Have a great day.